Hi, Caroline. Thank you so much for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Hi, thank you, Nate, for having me on. I'm really excited to be part of this, and I'm looking forward to seeing it all come together. My name is Caroline. I'm the director of Space Plus Astronaut Experiences, which is history's first Web3 space program. And yeah, so I'm relatively new to the space industry. And I'm just really, again, like the general vibe is I'm excited to be here.
Well, what got you into the space industry? I mean, what motivated you?
So actually my education and background is in nursing, and I was a peds nurse for almost a little over 10 years. And then the pandemic happened and I was looking for something else. And I ended up in digital marketing and social media essentially. And from there, I was able to work with really interesting and fascinating people as a content producer. And I did a few pieces on the space industry, one, women in space, and two, toxic work environments in the space industry. So yeah, from there I met Josh and Emily from Uplift Aerospace, and it kind of took off from there. And that's how I ended up here.
Yeah, the toxic work environment and the space industry reminded me. I guess there was that article that was written maybe a year ago by somebody at Blue Origin,
Yeah.
and then I think there's been a number of other places as well. Um, what do you think? I mean, is there anything that is particularly toxic about the space industry as opposed to other industries?
I think any time when you have a very limited group of people making a majority of the decisions, it's going to be toxic for people who aren't in the inside, right? So I think that's why it's really important for space to be more, more accessible to not only space experiences, but education and career opportunities in space. So then through that, we get more representation. And then other people are bringing in a diverse set of experiences, knowledge, and background that they're able to say, like, point out, hey, this doesn't feel right. And this isn't right because of X, Y, and Z. Because basically, again, like if you have the same people who are just so used to like how they're navigating life, they genuinely might not realize that the culture environment that they're creating is not it's not healthy and it's not thriving for other groups of people.
That's a very good point. I don't know if how much you know about me, but I used to be in like the computer software industry for like 25 years. And this February, I decided to make the jump over to NASA and start working to train to work in mission control.
Fantastic.
And it's been kind of interesting there. We were talking about attrition and people going to like SpaceX and other companies,
Mhm.
and remarks that um, SpaceX is doing all these cool things, but it's like Elon's company and he calls the shots. Whereas maybe you're not moving as quick or doing as cool of things, say at NASA, but you get to participate more in the decision making process. So you feel like you have a little bit more agency and engagement and actually getting to help drive things. And I mean, is that sort of the same type of thing that you're talking about?
I think it's a little bit of both. That's kind of what the opportunity comes with this new phase of the space industry, is that now there's other voices coming in, right? So it's not just governments or educational institutions that have access to these technologies and these experiences or resources. Now it's, like community members can do it, people who have the resources, billionaires can do it, right? Obviously they've thrown their hat in the ring and they've really transformed where we go off from here. I don't think it's like I don't want to say it's a bad thing. I think it's just, we're just experiencing growing pains, right? And for someone who is one of like the richest men in the entire world, they got to that place because they're thinking outside of the box in a different way. So again, I could appreciate why people on that, like kind of like coming from that perspective, aren't going to appreciate what everyday people are experiencing because they're just so far removed from that, right? But what we can do with that is turn it and like make it our own, so we can see that he was able to do this, and then hopefully we can just make it better, be part of the solution, is what I always try to look at when it comes to these kinds of situations. He is trying the best that he can from his ability, and then hopefully it opens the doors for other people to come in and make it even better.
Yeah, I know that's really kind of interesting about being so far removed.
Yeah.
I also I often think, like the distance between billionaires and like what I consider to be normal people like myself uh, is probably about the same distance as from me to like maybe people living on the streets. Like I have no clue about the struggles they have and like the opportunities and the challenges and stuff. And as much as I want to try to understand their life, I just like no. I mean, it's really not something that I can comprehend. And I guess, uh, is it possible for them to take that into account? I mean, like, is it like, do you get so rich that you just like think about doing something and it happens, and you just have trouble imagining it being any other way for other people?
So one thing when it comes to helping, the marginalized communities or populations is what people, there's what we think that they need, and then there's what they actually need, right? So I think anytime when there's a discrepancy of, lived experiences and then opportunities to help support and uplift and amplify, there needs to be communication when it comes to that. And when it comes to working with, again, like the world's um, richest or people who have a lot of resources, they are used to people, like just doing things their way because that's how they were able to find success, right? But I think, like, again, like as we move forward, what is going to be really important for success for humanity as a whole is that we all have an opportunity to share what is not only important to us, but what's important to our communities and what can best serve us. And then, finding ways to compromise around it and meet in the middle, because at the end of the day, with countries that have very different, priorities or different lifestyles. At the end of the day, like we're all human. We wish happiness and health for our loved ones and our community members. And I think when we start there, we can do a lot of things together.
That's true. And I've talked to a lot of people about us going back to the moon and getting their thoughts. And one common refrain that I've gotten is, why are we sending astronauts to the moon whenever there's poor people here on Earth, or like global climate change, or social injustice, or things like this. And how do you approach that conversation?
So we work with Dr. Sian Proctor. She is our astronaut, and she's our astronaut mentor as well as an advisor for Uplift Aerospace. And she says that solving for space solves for Earth. What people don't realize, a lot of things that we like, the technology that we use and like take for granted in our pockets, started out as space technology. It's like this futuristic thing. So I truly believe in that, especially because you have to prioritize mass and weight when it comes to sending things up to Earth, up to space. And there's a lot of things that we can learn from that mindset that we can definitely apply here, when it comes to, food supplies and regeneration and energy, like solving energy crisis and, purifying water, things like that. These are all things that we need to have solutions for at some point in the future if we don't make drastic changes on how we, take care of our Mother Earth spaceship right now. And we're all doing that in space. So yeah, like I really truly believe that the answers to help us move forward on Earth are in the stars and how we get there. And I think people are a lot more interested in that, unfortunately. So just even that, like having the intrinsic motivation to solve for these will then trickle down to Earth is the hope and the dream. And we see it every day with current technologies that we use. So I definitely see it as a possibility for future solutions as well.
I know so much was developed on the frontier and then
Mhm.
kind of made it back into sort of like the established society. So having a frontier would be fantastic. Um, so how did you find out we're going back to the moon?
So through work. And actually one of our Space Plus 5 astronauts, Joan, she is working on the project and she's very invested. So it's really great to have that personal connection with it. I'm not sending us to the moon, but it's really great to know somebody who has their own impact on it. And I just think that's like absolutely incredible. So I'm happy for her and her team and for us. It's just really exciting. And yeah, so that's definitely one of the perks of the jobs is being able to like Google fun space things that are happening. And then also, being part of the inspiration for as well and having like everyone drop in links into the chat and being abreast of like all the latest developments. It's just a really exciting time for space, even beyond the Artemis mission.
Well, you know, my original plan with this project was to interview people exclusively like at coffee shops, on the street, at the mall, and then COVID hit, and I kind of expanded it to doing it online, which has been good. But most of the people I talk to have no clue that we're going back to the moon. About 80% of them I don't know. I was wondering if this is in line with kind of like your experience, or do I just have am I just really unlucky on finding people that are informed?
No, I think you probably have a wider network than I do, which is amazing. You definitely want to have different perspectives and bumping into different people from all sorts of walks of life, right? So I find myself in the Web3 space and the tech space, the startup space, and like the space space. So a lot of those people are interested in this. My husband is very much a space nerd as well. So those like having those kinds of conversations isn't too far off from our daily, interactions. And we do listen to the astronomy podcast. So that's just been something. Yeah, I'm really impressed though I have to say that like when it comes to Web3 and we say that like we're doing space experiences, they think it's metaverse space. So it really is all about like the type of company you keep.
It's true. Yeah, it's true. I mean, they help to develop the filter that we see the world, and they're like the pathway to all of our information and news. And it's interesting. So what do you think about us going back to the moon?
So I'm really excited for the first woman to be on the mission, the first woman on the moon, and then the first person of color on the moon. I think those are really impactful, especially for the next generation of people who are most likely going to have careers in space, right? So you don't know what you don't know unless you learn about it, right? And it's hard to see yourself in, these different, experiences unless you see someone who looks like you. I spent a majority of my childhood literally thinking I was going to look like Barbie because that was the frame of reference that I had growing up. I grew up in a predominantly Caucasian, community. And even though I did hang out with like other Filipinos, that wasn't like, those were specific like community gatherings that we went to. And it wasn't necessarily like my neighbors were not Filipino. I was like the darkest person in my class until like middle school, almost high school, essentially. And so for my kids to see a lot of representation in the media today, in movies and cartoons, in TV shows, and now to see people who look like them or look like someone that like one of their friends go to the moon, is just really, honestly, like I cry about it sometimes. I just get really emotional because growing up like that, it's like it's hard to feel good about yourself when you don't see people celebrated, who look like you. So I think it's like really valuable for not only my kids, but kids who look like me and kids who look like them growing up, for sure.
Um, do you remember the first time you got on the internet? Like what year?
Yes. Yeah. Like AOL dial-up or Prodigy. Do you remember that? So I'm 37 for a reference. And
Okay.
yeah. So we used to have like those Mac boxes, and like you had to like type in codes. Like if you grew up in the 90s, you were a coder because to even sign onto a computer, you needed to give it commands, which is like, I just like, that's the first time I've said that out loud in a really long time. So yeah, I remember my mom, we were like one of the first people in our neighborhoods to get like internet. So people used to come over and sign on to AOL. And back then, you used to have screen names, right? Because it was like, you don't want to tell people your real name on the internet. That's weird. You don't want to meet people on the internet because that's weird. And it's funny to see how things have changed in, okay, like probably like 20, almost 30 years ago, basically. How long have you,
It
do you remember your first time going on the internet? I'm curious, since you have a career
Yes,
with it.
it would have been like in 93 or 94. Our local university had a modem bank, where you would just dial into, it wouldn't ask you for any username or password. And then you could like telnet to like any place. And there's like this place in, I think uh, some university where they gave you free shell accounts. So that was like my first experience with the internet, all text based, just text based email, text based news groups, and interesting. But I wanted to come back to kind of the concept of, um, uh, well, maybe I'll approach it from this way instead. I felt like that was kind of like a really amazing time where not only where people were dealing with each other just based upon words, like no images. You had no idea, the gender, the ethnicity, the age, or anything. You only had the words, and I was just wondering how you thought that. I mean, now is like, regardless of where you see people, you always see like their profile pic. I mean, it's like LinkedIn and Twitter and what have you. But there was a moment there where people were just communicating using, words. It just felt like kind of a moment where we could kind of get past, where we might have a true brain to brain connection, as opposed to having to really take into account, what our eyes are telling us.
So, it's really funny you should say that because I guess like trends and fashion, they have about like a 20 to 30 year life cycle. So like right now, a lot of 90s trends that we grew up with are now like fashionable again, which is, I think, is just really hilarious. 'Cause some of the stuff that I wore back in the day, to see it again on younger kids, I'm like, oh wow, that looks absolutely ridiculous, which means it totally looked ridiculous on us when we were wearing it. But so in the Web3 space, it's very similar to that currently. It's called like anons, for like short for anonymous, and people are based on how they present themselves, like through text, through audio, through, you know, like they what do you call it? Like they have like a username, they aren't visual, they hide behind avatars. And so I think that's like really fascinating to see that coming back. And I do see the value in it 1,000% for sure, because then, you know, people are focused on words, but there's always like that one side, right? Because there's like a double-edged sword to any and everything. It's like, okay, well, how authentic are they being? Because now they could have a persona that they're putting out into the world, because it's what's popular or profitable, or, you know, what is going to gain traction for them. And then it's kind of like, you know, it could also be completely fabricated on top of that. Like their words don't even need to be their own words. Like you can copy and paste. There's AI out there. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of that is like, as with anything in life, it really boils down to like, what is your intention with that? Like, why are you choosing to be anonymous? Why are you choosing to, you know, present yourself in that way? And yeah, as long as, like, for me, I'd like to think that I'm a good judge of character. A lot of the people I meet now all started off as internet friends. And there's definitely something to be said about building up that trust before you meet in person. And it definitely translates, right? Because you could spend months talking to one another. And if it comes, like, if you're talking about things that you're really passionate about, that you don't necessarily have someone in your real life to have those kind of conversations with, then to meet that person in real life, it like translates really well. I can definitely attest to that. I've met a lot of really great people like that. Like I've met Andrew in person, and he really is so incredibly sweet and warm, and also like brilliant. He is so humble. And to meet him in real life, it's very obvious that he's bright and talented and just like a regular old guy. And I love that. I love that about the internet for sure.
Yeah, and very caring too. I remember seeing him at the Inspiration 4 launch, and we got to go on a boat to see the Falcon 9 before, you know, in the morning. And
That's
he
so
was kind of
cool.
like doing like all these shout outs to people and saying, wish you could be here and stuff. So, you know, kind of aware that, you know, there's ways to include people who want to be included, who may not have been able to make the trip.
Yeah, he definitely has a talent for building up a tight-knit community that is incredibly supportive of one another. I think that is a true gift. And that's why we're here having this conversation, right? Because we're part of that community.
Absolutely. And I would say I'm probably even less active than you are. So I definitely I have some growth opportunities. Do you think we'll always be on Earth making these little short trips to places? Or do you think at some point in the future, we actually have humans living in other parts in the solar system?
So the CEO of Uplift Aerospace, Josh Haynes, is again another incredibly talented, brilliant, humble man. And he shared something that like was really compelling and eye-opening to me, that for Earth to really get back to the place where it needs to be a sustainable, you know, equitable, beautiful place to live, it needs a break from us. So we need to start moving things that have been, you know, that have been destructive, and give it time to heal and take care of it, you know, go through what it needs to go through. So we see you know, I see people moving, manufacturing, and things like that are like the major contributors to climate crisis off planet. And in a lot of ways, like that will move people off planet, right? Because there'll be opportunities for work and commerce beyond beyond planet Earth. And I know that I feel like at the very core of humanity, there is a sense of exploration and curiosity. So I see us building for a future where we will, we will give Earth a chance to heal itself, and then find ways to build elsewhere, and see what we can do beyond that, for sure.
It's funny, a lot of what you're saying echoes some of what I've heard Jeff Bezos said, about trying to move the heavy industry, energy production, mining, resource extraction, out into space, and then kind of zone Earth to just be residential and light industry. Um, I mean, I guess, were you aware of that, and is it all connected together?
So yeah, so I wasn't aware of that until I had that conversation with Josh. And then I kind of dug a little deeper, and then I realized how a lot of that is aligned. It is part of Uplift Aerospace's like long-term plan. We do have a product called Lunacrete. And basically we take moon regoliths, so like moon dust, and they've created like a proprietary method to basically turn it into raw building material, which is really exciting. And also I learned about how, like there are whole countries out there that are betting on mining for space resources. Like essentially they've ramped up research and, building industries around space mining. So there's a lot of people looking to space, and helping build the roads there for, again, like for space commerce and culture, essentially, which is wild. And you know what? It moves so fast, right? Like when you're working in tech and an industry like space, it all moves so fast. So it's, for me, like I'm happy to be part of the ride. Like, okay, this is the big idea that we're all working on. Like, why not? Like, let's see where it takes us. So it's been really exciting for me as someone who is, again, like relatively new to this industry, to read about what people are hoping to do to, keep updated with the new companies and startups and businesses and the people who are really truly like looking to execute this and make it happen. It's just again, I'm just excited to be here.
Well, we talked about the internet in the 90s. And one thing I've been saying, and I want to know if this makes sense to you, if it resonates at all. I feel like the 2020s are displaced what the 1990s were to the internet.
Yeah, I can see that. Because we're all kind of like figuring it out, right? And having fun with it and seeing what can come with it. Like, and it's funny because I also work in the Web3 space, so I hear a lot of those similar comparisons made as well. So we also have to be careful, like not to be like that person, but when there's a lot of, I guess, like new growth happening, there's always going to be like bad actors, right, who are going to take advantage of it. But then also like you have to think like we're still figuring this out. Like this technology is very new. And the one test that they did more recently where the like the emergency systems were engaged, right? And people were like, oh wow, like that could be worrisome. And what would actually be more worrisome is if it didn't work, right? And we were able to build those emergency fail safes in because of unfortunate things that happened previously, right? And that's why it's been such a long time since we've that's one of the reasons why we are just like, going back up instead of like continuing on, right? There were things that happened. There were, things that needed to be created or research. We needed data behind it. We needed new technology. And here we are. I think we just also have to be mindful that we're going to go through growing pains. And we just really need to make sure that we do it like the best way possible and learn from what happened before.
That's true. Definitely an exciting time, though. Wild ride ahead of us. If you could take a trip to space, would you?
Yes, 1000%. Yes. And to be honest, I wouldn't have thought that that would be a possibility for me because one, I don't, I'm not an astronaut. I'm most likely not going to apply to NASA to be an astronaut. I don't plan on getting my PhD and things like that. What's amazing about the commercial, space industry that's blossoming and like taking off is that it really does make space experiences more accessible. There's companies coming out with even more, excuse the real life in the background,
Right.
like more affordable experiences and options. And I'm really looking forward to those because, I don't necessarily need to get on a rocket ship. I would love to be on one of those balloons that are coming out that you hang out for a few hours and you get to see the Earth beyond the skies. And I think I would be perfectly happy with an experience like that. Or even, zero gravity flights, like that's amazing too, to experience weightlessness and even bump that down. I did an indoor skydiving experience, which was really not expensive at all to do. And so like having those kind of experiences that people don't necessarily know or even options, I think is what is going to open a lot of doors for people to be more interested in space and to see themselves in space as well.
Would you consider immigrating to Mars if that was a possibility?
It's a one-way trip, I would imagine. It would depend at what part of my life that would be. My mom my mom immigrated here from the Philippines, and she completely changed our family tree, right? Like, because she came to America, we're able to have the kind of lifestyle that my grandmother could not have even imagined. So I personally would love to be a grandmother one day. Lula is the word for grandma, and I plan on being the best kind of Lula there is. So if there comes a point where I feel fulfilled in that mission, then yeah. And when my husband wants to come, of course, I don't want to be on Mars by myself, but I think yeah, if I feel fulfilled in life with being the best kind of Lula, then yeah, I could see myself retiring on Mars.
That would be awesome. Wow. Oh, well, I really appreciate the time. And those are the questions I had. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
So I don't know if you're allowed to talk about this, but I would love to hear what you're excited to be working on at NASA. I think that's so great that you made that career change after such a long time, and that's also a thing too, right? Is like, you don't have to go into this straight out of college or whatever. There's always time to join in the space race in your own way. So I'd love to hear how what you're excited to be working on now.
Yeah. So I'm working on flight operations. So I'm actually training to work in mission control supporting the International Space Station. Our group is responsible for the electrical power system, so the solar panels, the charging the batteries, distributing that power to all the systems that need it, as well as like the external thermal control system. So the International Space Station's in a vacuum, so our only way to get heat out of the system is to use radiators, and we use ammonia to go and collect that heat and transport it to the radiators, and a lot of complicated stuff there. And then, of course, the solar panels have to turn, the thermal radiators have to turn. So those are like the three major systems that we are responsible for doing. So I'm currently going through something called knowledge capture, which is where they kind of teach us all the fundamentals and how these systems work, and what to do when things go wrong. Once I get done with that, I'll go through a few months of doing simulations, and then once I can show that I can keep my cool and survive the worst possible day that could happen with everything going wrong, then they'll actually let me work in the back room, supporting the front room people, and then hopefully eventually after that I get certified to work in the front room. So that's
That is
what I'm doing.
amazing. That is so great. Congratulations. So I don't know, not to turn the tables, but I would love to hear kind of like what your recommendations are to someone who's looking to make a career shift like you have. Again, that is so exciting. You're literally keeping people alive in space. That's fantastic.
That's true. But I mean, for me, I've spent like 25 years behind a computer typing away. So I knew I didn't want to do that going into space, right? I think doing what I was doing before NASA at NASA would have really felt like missing the boat. I wanted something that was like different each day, where I get to have like a broad kind of exposure to the program. I mean, people from our group train the astronauts in electrical power systems, so you have that direct astronaut connection. They work on operations. We talk to engineering. So I really wanted something that would let me get around and would kind of push me a new way. So I think the number one thing is know what you want, because it's if you don't know what you want, it's going to be a lot harder to get it.
That is fantastic. And that's great life advice. Not even just career advice. That is great life advice. Wow. Thank you, Nate. Thank you for such a great call and making time for this today. It's been a really fun and like enjoyable conversation. Thank you for it.
Thank you. And if you're ever in Houston, maybe Paris, you and I can meet up.
Yeah. Wait, do you guys hang out like in real life, like on the regular? Because he's based in Houston, right?
He is. Actually, the funny thing is I've never seen him in Houston.
Oh,
I take that back. I suggested to him that he volunteers at Space Center Houston, and I have seen him there a few times. So that's right. I met his wife, but I think the first time I met him was actually in Florida watching Inspiration 4 launch. So
that's so great. That's an even better friendship story.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, definitely. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, is that good?